Everyone to the Midcoast Community Council. I'd like to open the meeting with, will the secretary please call the roll?
Certainly. Claire,
I'm here under the provision of, what is it?
AB 2449.
Thank you.
okay, Kimberly,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Chris,
Here.
Connie, yes, and Gus? Is Gus with-
Gus will be joining us in progress.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum in the room. Let's start with the Board of Supervisors report and reports from other government officials. Are there any government officials with us tonight who would like to give us a report or an update?
Yes, this is Deborah Penrose from the City Council of Half Moon Bay.
Welcome, Deborah.
Hi. This is my first meeting. I hope to be coming every 2 weeks. Report. The City Council has been kind of quiet lately, but we did receive an update on the construction progress from Seton Coastside Administration at our last meeting. They essentially told us what we already knew, that they were working on getting the place ready to open. When I questioned them about the urgent care, they were a little reluctant to talk about it. I'm not sure exactly why. They did admit that they had 4 beds set aside for urgent care use, not that they were promising us an urgent care. They were working on the emergency room and the skilled nursing facility parts. We adopted a resolution authorizing our city manager to execute a second amendment to the agreement with El Centro de Libertad for the CARES Community Responder Program, which we have here in Half Moon Bay and which operates on the coast as well, extending their term through June the 30th. We are hoping to figure out some way to continue them after June the 30th this year, but it will mean funding. The county has their own program of mental health responders, but they have not seemed to have been able to get anybody, any of the cities to really fully participate in it. Doesn't seem to have been a very successful program so far. Part of the issue is that they do not have, they do not use 911 for mental health issues for people to call in. They have the 988 number. That's hard for people to remember. They're not used to it. The other issue seems to be that they haven't really provided their mental health responders with walkie-talkies so that they can keep in contact with the sheriff's office. It's one of the reasons our CARES program has been so successful, is that everybody knows what's going on at all times before a call is actually made out to the sheriff or to the CARES from one or the other of them. We were working on our draft housing element, and we agreed to add $300,000 from the city's affordable housing fund to continue to support those folks that were displaced in the mass shooting, that we will be housing at Stone Pine Cove. Happy to say that construction is nearly finished on that. The houses will be moving in sometime in the next month, and we hope to have people housed by June. Applications for purchase of the homes has been made public, and apparently there's been overwhelming support for that, response to that. And that's about it for my report. Any questions for anybody from anyone?
Kevin?
Yes. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for the update. A quick question about 988. So I've mentioned this in different community forums and with different community members, and there seemed to be some confusion as to whether or not the mental health professional comes to the situation or to the individual that's calling with a police officer. And there seemed to be a lot of trepidation and almost fear around that aspect. Can you speak to that?
Who has fear?
The individuals who may have wanted to call.
I'm not sure what you mean. The people the citizens that are calling
The citizens
988
that are wanting to
saying,
call 988 and needed mental health assistance instead of police assistance, we're assuming that if they called 988, that mental health professional would be accompanied by a police officer.
well, I'm not sure what happens in the county. I can only speak for what happens in the city. And that's not an issue in the city. People call and they expect mental health respondents to come, and they do without the sheriff, unless there seems to be a need for the sheriff to come. And that's something that between the sheriff, the dispatcher, and the CARES people, they can figure that out before anybody goes out to the citizen's home to check on the situation.
That indeed was the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there
Did I
any other?
answer it all right? Do you understand what I said?
Yes, you did. I think
Okay.
there's just was a little confusion with a few people that I had talked to who wanted to use the service. So thank you for addressing that.
Sure.
Are there any other questions for Deborah? I don't see any. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Okay.
joining our meeting.
Thanks.
You're
Deborah.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Are there any other officials who would like to give an update? I don't see anybody online. In which case, we'll move on to public comments and announcements, and I'm going to open for general public comment on items not on the agenda. Does anyone have a public comment? I see Greg Diegas.
Hi, folks. Just before the meeting, I forwarded you all a notice of a special meeting at the Montero Water and Sanitary District having to do with the landslides, long-term landslide and settlement in Seal Cove. I hadn't seen anybody attending the MWSD meetings from MCC, so I thought this would be of interest. The special meeting's tomorrow at 5 p.m. I will be attending.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments? I don't see any. I have one announcement. We'd like to welcome Ekaterina I'm sure I'm going to ruin this. Ekalasovskaya with us. Ekaterina is an intern who's going to be working to help us with various tasks administratively. And I see that she's here. Ekaterina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name is Ekaterina.
Hi.
Hi, but please call me Kate. I'm a student from College of San Mateo. I'm originally from Russia. I moved here 5 years ago, so now I'm here. Nice to meet you all.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
too.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much for this is really great. It's going to be very helpful to us, and we hope that you'll also learn a lot. I think that you are hoping to learn something about local government. So we're very happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm closing public comments and announcements and moving on to the consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes of March 12th, 2025. Are there any comments, requests, clarification on the minutes? None. Do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve?
A second?
Sorry.
Oh, cursor.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Claire? Claire?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes?
Kevin?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Connie? Yes.
And the minutes are approved. We're doing really well, so we're going to move on to our regular agenda, which I'm sure our guests will be happy that we're getting to it pretty early, which is the updated fire hazard severity zone maps for San Mateo County. And welcome, Jed Wilson.
Do you happen to have the PowerPoint available to be
Um,
displayed?
Yeah. it's a-
I think we do.
Okay.
Don't have it up.
Was it Jed?
Jed, yes, yes.
You have it, Kim?
I know, I just go on, I can pull it up if you need me to. Do you have it? Really?
I just need to open it in my
Okay.
file.
Are you a co-host?
I don't know if I'm a co-host.
You are a co-host.
Sorry, this might take a minute.
That's all right.
You're with the fire department.
Yeah, so as we're getting it set up, I am the unit chief for CAL FIRE, so I oversee San Mateo and Santa Cruz unit for county. And we have 5 contracts, so Coastside Fire Protection District contracts with the state of California, CAL FIRE for services. So I'm also by authority the fire chief of those contracts, so San Mateo County Fire Department, Coastside Fire Department, Pajaro Valley Fire Department, and Santa Cruz County Fire Department, and then CSA 4 in Santa Cruz County.
So you give oversight to the unincorporated coastside here.
Correct,
Good.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it's only letting me open it as a PDF.
That's, we
You can
can,
do it.
we can
You can still share.
skip the
it.
video. I can tell people where to go to get that
I
information.
think it should display, it
No,
just
it
won't
should be-
display the same way.
Okay.
So
Sharing your screen.
it says the host would like you to unmute. I
Hmm?
don't think you want me to unmute. I think I need to, you need to give me the power to share the screen. Let's see. I think that worked.
There we go. I think.
Oh, there you go.
All right. So for those folks online, my name is Jed Wilson. I'm the unit chief for the San Mateo Santa Cruz unit. And I'm here this evening representing the Coastside Fire Protection District as their fire chief. So I know there will probably be some questions that are related to CAL FIRE. However, the LRA fire hazard severity zones impact the local response or the local agency having jurisdiction. So that's Coastside Fire Protection District or San Mateo County Fire. So it's a weird, cover the patch kind of, it's a weird kind of balance to be in, but we can go to the next slide. And if it's going to, if it'll play the video, if not, it probably will not. That's okay.
It's a PDF, it's probably flat.
Yeah, it's a flat
Yeah.
file. So the video there can be found on the CAL FIRE Office of State Fire Marshal website. And this is about a 3-minute video that really gives a good understanding of the fire hazard severity zones and how we've gotten to where we are with the fire hazard severity zones and how they're developed. Because that's the big question is, why have we gone from certain areas being very high to not being very high and vice versa over the last 10 years of them coming out. And it depicts kind of how that is measured based on, in the last 10 years, we've had a lot of catastrophic fires that have given a lot of data for us to put in data sets to understand the potential based on forecasted weather and all of our weather modeling. We've been collecting more and more data over those last 10 years as technology improves, so it's provided for more accurate mapping. We can go to the next slide.
Jed, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So in looking at the updated map, it kind of looked like all of the areas pretty much turned red and especially in El Granada, the unincorporated coastside, the like hugging neighborhoods here.
Yeah.
And without seeing the video, is it possible for you to give a brief summation as to what were the kind of core contributors to making that switch from, some people were like, I was in a safe area, and then I woke up and saw this report, and now my area is bright red.
Yeah, so I mean, we're looking out here, it's still a little bit light. You can look up the hill, right? So you have topography and fires driven by weather, fuel, and topography. Those are the three things that make a fire move, right? So you have strong fuels, strong weather, and steep topography, you're gonna get strong fuel or fire conditions. So you have the hills that come down into houses, which are also fuel. And you can see that there's not a break, right? So when the state maps came out, there was very high to a imaginary line of jurisdiction. So we looked at it as, my anticipation was that would carry over. I think based on recent events in Southern California and the data that we've been collecting, that carried farther in the neighborhoods than we initially thought with the maps that were made.
And the additional fuel would just simply be trees, or is it eucalyptus specific because they're
It's
more volatile? Or?
They use different technology to see what types of fuels they are and how conductive they are in certain weather conditions. So as you know, as eucalyptus heats up, it actually off gases, and it's a very oily liquid that comes off of it. It's flammable. So eucalyptus are probably a higher rating in that calculation within their mapping, compared to having a grass field that's gonna move fuel potentially faster. It's a lighter flasher fuel than eucalyptus.
Thank you.
So just kind of how we got here. In 1980, there was the Panorama Fire, which was one of the more substantial fires in the 80s. There was some public resource code that was created saying that we needed to have fire hazard severity zones. And then over the years, we came to 1991 to the Tunnel Fire. Most everybody knows that as the Oakland Hills Fire. It was actually called the Tunnel Fire. And some more, a bill called the Bates Bill was put in 1992, saying that we needed to identify very high hazard severity zones in the LRA. So within the local area, not the state responsibility. Through the years, 2017, the Tubbs Fire up above San Francisco, up in the Sonoma Lake unit. And then in 2018, the Camp Fire in Butte, which is extremely devastating. And then unfortunately, we can continue past year and go to 2025, where we had the Palisades, the Eaton fires, and in between them, numerous fires with large structure loss. So Assembly Bill, I think it's 62 or 642, Senate Bill 63 in 2001. Identified that we needed to have moderate and high fire hazard severity zones in the LRA. So that legislation directed CAL FIRE, Office of State Fire Marshal Land Use Planning, to develop the maps for issuance. So we're in the issuance phase now. So they came out on February 24th. We have 120 days for adoption of an ordinance by legislation. And that ordinance will then be submitted to the Board of Forestry, and they will keep that on file. So that's kind of the process we're in. For El Granada and the community of the coast side, we've met with the city of Half Moon Bay and worked back and forth. And we, the Coastside Fire Protection District, will be the creator and approver of the ordinance, which will encompass the city of Half Moon Bay. So city of Half Moon Bay won't have a ordinance than the Coastside Fire Protection District because we're within the same boundaries.
I'm assuming there's actionable items within the ordinance that would be proposed that might be tied to funding.
Oh, I can't. I tried to switch to the next screen because you're getting there. So I wanted to do, it's the next slide after this. LRA versus SRA. We hear the term LRA, and that's fire service speak. Local response area. So that's a local entity having jurisdictional oversight of that area and responsibility. In the SRA, the state responsibility area, the state of California has the responsibility to suppress wildland fires. So it's not the responsibility of that jurisdiction. And Coastside Fire Protection District has SRA within it, but that fiscal responsibility does not fall onto Coastside. That response falls onto the state of California. So that kind of show you the difference of SRA and LRA. Next slide is this going to be a picture of the map, which we've all seen so far, and it's very red. But it's a hazard map, so that means we can consider mitigations and change that map. And that's what I'd like to see the whole community come together, Coastside Fire, groups like this, where we can come up with ideas and actually put plans in place and actionable items that are going to make a difference to reduce the hazard and change the map. That's the ultimate goal. So your question is the next slide. And this is the zones. So what the zones have within them, the impacts of being identified as a very high, a high, or a moderate. So for the moderate folks, you're just, the ordinance covers you, but you have no impact really, other than hopefully doing your home hardening defensible space to help out your neighbors. In the high, we adopt the ordinance, chapter 7A, which is the WUI chapter for home hardening, homes in the wild urban interface applies, wildland urban interface.
Okay.
So chapter 7A is the standards for buildings built within an identified WUI. So if you're in a high fire hazard severity zone, that is a WUI zone. And if you're building a new home, you have to meet those standards.
A
So,
new home,
A new home.
24, 25 and forward, once the ordinance.
Once
is
the
passed.
ordinance is passed, yeah.
Okay,
And that might be, you're looking at building a home, that's a fiscal impact. But building to these standards, as you probably saw in the news, you'd see a house standing in the middle of an area that was new construction and maybe built to the chapter 7A. And it shows that it works. So you're investing early for, hopefully we never have to deal with a fire, but you're kind of investing early in that. As you move up to the very high, that's where there's a lot of impacts. So CEQA starts taking effect. So if you're going to be doing anything identified as a project, you have to run that project through a CEQA, through the California Environmental Quality Control Act. That is not a quick event to happen. That's usually probably 16 to 24 months to get your CEQA approved, to make sure that you're meeting all those mitigations before you can actually do work on the ground. So the governor recently.
did you say 16 to 24
months?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Just to clarify, this is for what kind of projects you're talking about?
A fuel mitigation project.
Okay, who would be the lead agency?
The lead agency would probably be the agency of the land or the owner of the land.
No, the local government agency that would act as the CEQA lead agency.
Correct. Yeah, so
Who
like
would that be?
if the project was in the city of Half Moon Bay
Okay,
and it was identified as a Half Moon Bay city project, they would probably be the lead for the CEQA.
okay, but not CAL FIRE or.
Projects can be identified as CAL FIRE projects.
Yeah.
And then we will take the lead. The governor recently had an emergency proclamation about 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And it identifies lightening the Coastal Act, the Coastal Commission, CEQA. How that is going to play out, we're not exactly sure yet. But hopefully that will lessen some of the restrictions while still making sure we're maintaining the environmental controls that we need so we can move projects ahead quicker.
So I'm assuming if you're saying homeowners, that it's similar to like permitting processes.
So a homeowner, as long as you're meeting the jurisdictional boundary you live in, the city or the county, and you're removing vegetation within their regulatory, you can do that. You don't need to go through CEQA.
Got it.
When it's a government controlled agency, that's when CEQA is initiated. Okay. There's the chapter 7A applies in the very high, fire safe regulations, the safety element. The big thing is defensible space inspections. So when the ordinance is passed, very high needs to have a defensible space inspection done, which has been being done in the SRA, but not necessarily in the LRA. So Coastside Fire Protection District, we had our board meeting earlier today. we're gonna have in a month, that'll be one thing that we bring forward on how we're gonna implement the impact on defensible space inspections. Is it gonna be the fire engine going out? Are we gonna have inspectors that are going out? We saw the map of Coastside.
Mhm.
We have a lot of red. So that's a lot of homes within that boundary that we're gonna need to make sure we're doing defensible space. Are we doing it every year on those homes? Are we doing a rotation? Those are things we're gonna have to figure out. But that's hopefully gonna be the fire department or the inspectors out working with the community to identify things and having a positive outcome. Instead of kind of someone coming and telling you to trim your tree, you know, we want it to be a positive interaction. So hopefully we can seek that change with the community. And then there's the hazard disclosure on both high and very high. So if you decide you're gonna move to a different area in the state of California or outside the state and you're gonna sell your home, you have to have an inspection done prior to sale that says that you have defensible space. So that's gonna take effect. So that's also an impact on those inspectors, because every time a house is gonna be sold, the realtor has to contact. And we do that in the SRA in the state, but it's something new for the LRA. So we're gonna have to look at how we're gonna facilitate that as well.
So, we have been talking about this since I've been on the MCC and prior, and I think when you are looking at the very granular level that you are talking about, there's one portion of it, right? So there's an agency or an agent that owns property, a government or that type of agency. But then now you're talking about houses, and this is post-build, I guess, retrofitting for safety. And you're talking about potentially removing trees and, hardscaping and making sure that the house is blunted from potential severe fire risk. The costs of that is just assume that it's going to go straight to the homeowner. Is part of this ordinance going to establish some assistance or some funds to help homeowners in these very high risk areas address some of these issues?
I don't have a perfect answer for you. All of the things that you just mentioned are things we're exploring with the Board of Supervisors here. Marin County has some very good examples of a great way to do things. So we're looking at that. And in the next couple of weeks, we're meeting to look at some of the options. So maybe there's grants that are available, like if you want to replace your lawn to reduce water and you put an artificial turf, there's you get a rebate type thing. We're gonna have to look at things like that to incentivize people to make a positive change to help out the whole community.
Yeah, and this is a community who's cutting down eucalyptus trees on neglected lots already and spending upwards of 10, 20, even $30,000 and $40,000 on lots that aren't theirs to regain insurance coverage. So that's a big issue.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be a major topic for once the ordinances are in place. And right now, the folks online, everyone here, you're understanding is listening, right? But when someone comes and knocks on the door and tells them that, hey, this happened 6 months ago and here's your defensible space inspection, and they don't understand it, it's gonna impact them at that point. So getting that word out on how it's gonna affect everybody is gonna be a big thing.
So Jed, I see somebody else has a question. Do you want to continue to take questions as you go, or do you want to wait till the
I
end?
really only have 2 more slides. And I'll just go through those 2 slides and then we'll open it up for questions. So then it'll be free reading.
Yeah.
Okay, so Larry,
Interaction's good. I don't want to just stand up here and
Okay, there'll be plenty of.
do PowerPoint.
I see your hand raised, and we'll wait till we're finished with the next 2 slides.
So if we could go to the next slide, this is kind of my what we can do slide. And it takes the community. I grew up in a very fire prone community when I was growing up. I think we evacuated like probably 4 times and our whole property burnt like at least twice. And we had really good defensible space. It's what we can do as the homeowner, not necessarily when I say this as the fire department. So making sure you have good defensible space and educate yourself on what that is. Home hardening, so covering vents and the eaves, anything that's going to let an ember in and it's receptive to that is a problem. That's where those fires start as these embers. And if you saw LA fires, 80-mile-per-hour winds, it's just kind of like raining embers. Fire safe, the San Mateo Fire Safe is the first fire safe in the state of California. And becoming firewise communities. So maybe identifying geographical areas that you consider a community that will meet the requirements of firewise. And then that provides some insurance relief as well. There's a certain percentage you get off when you become a firewise community. And then there's also bringing the community together, chipper programs, doing defensible space, walking the neighborhood, evacuation routes, address signage, all these positive things that Firewise has. Participating in evacuation drills. We're going to have some evacuation drills this summer, at least, and one more that I know we're working on right now on the coast. And
We knew that was you. Announcing you coming in.
participating in those, so we did one last, like getting participation sometimes is hard. You feel like you're getting a lot of people and then not very many people show up. So participating in the drill kind of gives you a reality of how difficult it could be to evacuate in that type of situation. And then we're going to continue to work on messaging, especially with DEM at the county level, to make sure that we're providing accurate and concise messaging. Signing up for the SMC alerts, understanding when something is happening early. Palisades, Eaton, Tubbs fire, Caldor fire, Park fire, all these fires were in significant weather events that were forecasted. So understanding that probability is there when we're in a red flag warning and being prepared to leave in case of emergency and not kind of being behind the curve is extremely important. One thing from Southern California that was a big takeaway that I've heard folks talk about, and this is super granular, but taking a single car instead of, if you have 4 cars at your house. I have old cars and I don't want to leave them. I say this, we're gonna take the good new car. But taking a single car is important because that's if a family of 3 takes 3 cars, that's 3 more cars or 2 cars on the road. Times by 100, that's 200 cars. It adds up extremely quickly. So reducing the number of cars during an evacuation, and then knowing your zone. So it used to be Zone Haven. They were purchased from Genesis, but understanding what zone you are in. So when you do see that message, and if you're using an app that tells you that it gives you an alert, hopefully using SMC alerts, it'll say zone X, Y, and Z 005 is under order. Knowing that, oh, I am zone 5. That is important to me, and not trying to look it up and figure out what zone I am. It used to be a recommendation to have it like on your refrigerator. But I think putting stuff on refrigerators is a thing of the past now. They seem all clean and stainless, but and then the last slide is this kind of that preparation slide. Zone 0 is a new term that some folks in here may have heard and online. It'll probably be finalized at the end of this year, and then it'll be a 3-year phase-in implementation, I believe is what they're looking at, and that's from the side of your structure 5 feet out will not have any combustible material. And when you think about that as like an architect or someone who does, planning and loves the way their house looks, their hedges, having to remove a hedge or potentially removing a hedge because it could be a ember collection, it's going to be a lifestyle change for a lot of us. And then zone 1's that 5 to 30 feet. And then 30 to 100 is the zone 3. So just allowing, so if that fire was coming to your house, think about it, you're slowing it down so it can't get there. And then if your house happened to be the start, it doesn't have the ability to go out as well. So it's kind of reciprocal both ways, protecting your home and protecting the wildland around your home. And then I'm open to questions.
Great, that's fascinating. So I wonder if we started doing this process where we take clarifying questions first and then comment, and I tripped up on that last time.
I'm sorry, I have no additional questions.
So-
Clarifying.
So I'd like to ask the council for clarifying questions. Chris?
So the ordinance, I'm familiar with the Central Fire District has an ordinance they enforce over in Hillsborough, Belmont area. Is it modeled kind of like that? They've been doing that for about 3 years. They do home inspections, they do citations.
It's similar, but I don't believe their ordinance is based off of the fire hazard severity zones.
I see.
So they will, so in the state of California, there's 407 cities, municipalities, and districts that have to adopt an ordinance that have LRA. So they, like, there's, in this county, all those fire chiefs had a meeting last month. We're all impacted by it. We all have LRA, so.
But it's similar in the sense that you have inspections, you have
Yep.
requirements for defensible
Yep.
space. You have responsibilities of
Yep.
homeowners to perform the work, or they'll get it done for them and build and that sort of thing.
We'll see where we go with that. Like, that's gonna be difficult to. If someone's gonna go out and fix something on someone's property that they're not correcting, we'll have to, that'll be a board decision for sure.
And then for public service announcing, how do you anticipate you'll be getting the message out that this new ordinance is in effect? Assuming it goes into effect.
Social media is gonna be a big one. So we're San Mateo County and Coastside Fire Protection District both have, Nextdoor, X, Twitter, or and Twitter are the same thing now. Facebook, all of the avenues. So it'll be pushed out that way and then probably message through DEM. And then on April 24th or 6th, I'd have to look at my calendar. There's DEM's putting on a wildfire event at the San Mateo Convention Center, I believe is what it is.
It's 26.
And I'll be there as a panel member with Chief Pucci from Central. And I believe Mr. Cosgrave will be there potentially as well. And we'll probably have information there to push it out. And then it's gonna probably be once we start doing defensible space inspections within the LRA that it's gonna be heard, yeah.
Great,
And if there's suggestions, I'm always open to suggestions on how we can message things better to communities. So I'm always open.
So when will the defensible space inspections start?
So there's a time frame of like implementing, right? So we will probably, I can't speak for the board's direction because we haven't passed the ordinance yet,
Okay.
but I'm most likely they'll probably want us to start reporting next year on making a difference. I would, if we have a 3-year phase in and we can do it in year 1, I feel like we're doing a better service to the public to get it completed in year 1, first round of inspections, because that's going to inform all the people to start making an educated choice to do their home hardening defensible space. If we waited till year 3, that gives us 2.5 years of where we potentially have a fire without people making a positive change.
I mean, so for my benefit, I should do it immediately, right? But my goal in asking this question is give me a date to when I need to finish this. Oh, the 5 feet thing.
The 5 foot thing?
The 5 foot.
That's
thing.
still being like fully vetted out.
Okay.
But if you can make a difference, if you have like a plant that's up against the wall
Yes.
and it's in a pot, and you can have a bare wall and accept that when you walk out on your porch, move it 5 feet away and have it over there, and you become accustomed to it. When people ask, when should I start doing defensible space? Yesterday. Like, we should all be out there making sure that we have defensible space
Okay.
yesterday,
Okay.
because tomorrow could be when we need it.
Okay.
Other council members? Kevin?
So I'm thinking about the risk areas that you outlined, and I'm thinking about compliance with home hardening and kind of passing inspections. And I think kind of similar to what mentioning suggestions, and this is a community that for a long time feels like things happen to them at the last minute sometimes. And so any way that you would kind of preemptively, even, prior to, an ordinance, if you know that some things are hardlined already when it comes to like home hardening or safety, guarding your home. I think it would be good to get that kind of stuff out, because like, as you mentioned, if there are certain things that we can do tonight when we get home, or, right away, I think that would be something that would be very kind of nicely responded to by the community. And then in looking at compliance, have you guys talked about what that might look like? Because I would imagine in those high-risk areas, you're gonna go knock on somebody's door and say, you're gonna cut these 3 trees down. Like, is that where it stops? You've done your job, you pulled this home, they need to remove these 3 trees, and they can't afford to remove the trees, so the trees stand, kind of thing?
That's gonna be a board decision on how they would want to enforce their ordinance. And that's a tough one, right? You have folks that have been in a home, it's been passed down generation to generation. They might not have the fiscal ability to take out a large tree. It's very expensive to do that.
That's an issue right now.
So then we have to look at other avenues, like you talked about, maybe working with community groups, that maybe there's a nonprofit that helps people with fuel mitigation. In Santa Cruz County, there's a group that takes high school kids with waivers, and they go and clear folks that are of age that can't clear their property. They clear the property on the weekend for them. They were initially called the Brush Brigade. I think they changed their name, but those are the types of things we need to look at outside the box.
So the board will determine whether or not there's like some hardline compliance measures put in place after the ordinance.
Yes, the local agencies
Okay.
would be implementing that. Yeah.
Other council members have questions?
That's a question. I have a
Connie?
question. So when you mentioned the alerting coming from through the San Mateo County, I don't recall ever seeing any alerting through the storm. So when we had the big Santa Cruz fire, for example, that was from a storm, right, from lightning that came through. Because I remember seeing it that way, but I don't remember ever getting alerts that would potentially be something to consider.
You just sign up for it. I just did it.
No, I have.
No,
I have.
No,
I've done the
that's
alert.
something like, so with the CCU fires, like that time frame, we've improved messaging. And the applications of which you can send messages efficiently. So that's something that, at least in the unit, we're gonna look at when there's severe weather that's forecasted. That is a notification people get, because getting notified you need to evacuate, when 2 days ago you could have known that we were gonna be in red flag.
Yeah.
We have to balance that, and that's kind of that early warning of like, do you have your go bag? Do you have your, valuables, deed, all that type stuff, memorabilia, packaged, ready to go in your single car? If you need to go, instead of scrambling to get it when that time comes, when you get the text message.
So that'll start taking effect now, these severe weather conditions.
That is we don't control all of the messaging, but that's the goal.
And so just along with that messaging, right?
Yes.
Supervisor Mueller talked about, with tsunami, people were getting conflicting messages, so I would just,
Yeah, so this week, they put out the emergency dashboard, San Mateo County. They have now an emergency dashboard, which is, I'm assuming it's available on the phone as well on the mobile app. But that's going to be able to provide a lot of information, and that's that single source of going to that for factual, verified information. Instead of looking on, you go on social media, you're going to potentially get every flavor, but going to a verified source is good. And they put that out because it's tsunami week. And they put that out on Monday.
okay.
So Gus was able to pull up the PowerPoint with the video. Is there any value to showing the video at this point, or would you like us to?
I mean, I don't think so now. But,
Okay.
I appreciate Gus's ability to do that. Thank you. And the extra effort you put in over there.
Okay. Let's go to the public then. I see Larry DeYoung.
Yes, And I saw the chief earlier today at the Coastside Fire Protection District meeting. I have a kind of a mind bender of a question. I also am trying to make a point here as well. So I live in a very high fire zone as in the state SRA, as many people in the Midcoast do. So my first question is, what enforcement and what rules will apply to people in the state responsibility area?
So the PCA 4291, which dictates the rules for defensible space, apply in the SRA as the same as the LRA now, or will when an ordinance is passed in the LRA. So you have the ability of 3 inspections, and I'm not the best, I'm not an enforcer of this, but your first primary inspection, you're either gonna pass or not pass. And then you get a secondary inspection. And then on the third inspection, there is a possibility for a monetary fine. It's, I believe, $100 is what's set in legislation. I'm not sure how often that we get there.
So thank you. There's another part to my question that's kind of a mind bender. So I live in the SRA, and as you know, I represent RAM, Red Alert, Montara, Moss Beach, and we're concerned with the Devil Slide bypass right of way, which is also a very high fire hazard. It looks like half of it is in the SRA and half of it is in the LRA. And
Yeah, and we
all of
in
it,
a little national park there too, I think.
none of it's in the national park. The Caltrans ceded their portion to GGNRA.
Okay.
So I don't believe any of the row is in national park anymore, but I could be wrong. But my question is, I have a bunch of questions, is for one thing, I live next to the row, as do many people in Montara and Moss Beach, and I have no defensible space because the row overhangs my house, and this is state-owned property. So I find it kind of paradoxical that the state's going to come to my house and order me to do certain mitigations when I can't even I can't even get 30 feet of defensible space because the states let this overgrow. So I'm unclear on the jurisdictions here and what recourse homeowners like myself will have in all this. I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a very tough one. And I think as we continue the conversation with your group that you guys have formed in Caltrans, hopefully sooner than later, as I talked earlier at the board meeting, that we can come up with an answer to that question for you and for everybody that's along that, and hopefully make a positive change. So yeah, I don't have a direct answer. It's difficult because I am the state, right? Also, and we're impacting people. So I'd love to go out there and have our crews trim trees and do an effective measures, but there's also some species that live within that corridor now that dictate the way we can do business.
Well, my last comment is, frankly, I hope the state comes in orders me to do a bunch of mitigation, in which case I'll have a court case. I'll have a court case because I can't mitigate because of the state. It's really crazy. But thank you for your time, and we do look forward to working with Cal Fire and the Coastside Fire Protection District.
Thank you, Larry. I wrote your phone number down, so hopefully in the next week or so we'll have a conversation.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Greg Diegues?
You can guess I have 8 questions, but to be respectful of everybody's time, I think the first question I should ask is, how can we write you to get answers to these 8 questions?
How can you write me? Like email?
Right.
It's just
email, I assume.
Don't spam me, but it's jed.wilson@fire.ca.gov.
at fire.ca.gov.
Yep.
Maybe the council will take my questions and bundle them with others and ask for answers, but I would comment, just as an aside, we already had an evacuation practice. Jed, you may be aware, Pacifica police officer was nearly killed in the tsunami scare, and there is no evacuation. And the tourists aren't going to know about our alerts or our dashboards, and there weren't any tourists when we had that emergency. So we've really got to do a mitigation job here. I have a house with wooden front steps that need to be rebuilt, and I have fences that touch on the side of my house. Where can I get guidance on the flammability of stair and deck materials? I'm concerned because I'd heard stories that some of the synthetic decking material is extremely flammable. So I need to know what I can do to secure my property and still have a fence and still have front steps.
So the Zone Zero group is working on identifying those things. I did see a depiction, a diagram that showed like fencing coming to 5 feet and then a separate type of non-combustible fencing running to the house, and same with decking material. But I didn't have identified products of which those were. I would say that go down to your local hardware store or lumber company and ask them those questions, and hopefully they could give you an accurate information. Marin County has been very progressive, as I mentioned earlier, and their site might be a good resource to see if they've already pre-identified some of those things.
I would just mention that it's tough to get honest answers about flammability of material from people who are trying to sell you that material. So I don't expect to get honest answers from the hardware store and their vendors. I will email you the questions unless the council wishes to coordinate getting responses. Thank you.
Just a question, Greg. So you said you have 8 questions and you're not asking them because you feel they're too lengthy, or?
I just feel it would be, I don't want to monopolize the discussion here. I don't want to put him on the spot where he may not have all these answers. He was here to talk about the new zone definitions. These questions go far and wide.
Okay, I see. All right. Thank you. Burnett Silvera?
Yeah, just a quick question. I was wondering if you're aware of any certification that contractors carry that show that they have knowledge of home hardening, so that homeowners can get some assistance to get on some of these things. One of the things you made comment to was like the vents in homes. You're getting sure you're getting the proper vent for whatever the requirement is, and it's meeting the requirement. Or do you know of any certification that contractors could carry that could help with that?
You're ahead of us. Marin County, another good example. They do have pre-identified contractors that know and understand the home hardening and what is needed. And I think when the group meets here in the county of San Mateo, that's something we will probably establish to make sure that the community has good verified contractors that understand what they need to do to successfully harden a home.
Thank you. That would be great. I mean, that question that issue that Greg brought up about, say, for the home, if you have a fence up to that touches your home, well, what are you going to replace it with? A wooden fence. That would be great. Thank you.
I believe it was Moraga Orinda fire, maybe. Don't quote me on that, but you could look. They maybe had another pre-established contractor list as well for that geographical area. Their previous chief before he retired was very progressive in this.
Okay, great. Thanks, Burnett. Are there other questions? I don't see any hands raised. Claire, did you have any questions? You're on mute.
No, I don't think so. I'm sure I will. It sounds like a lot of this is yet to be fleshed out, and I'm hoping that we will. I'm sure we'll stay in touch, but I'm a big fan of the FireWise and FireSafe movements, and anything that we can do as a council to promote those things, I think is good. But no specific questions.
Okay, I see Chris has his hand raised.
Invite Greg to copy MCC's on his questions so that we can continue to monitor what this discussion and provide answers to the community if it's appropriate in the future.
Sure, if Greg's comfortable doing that. Greg, if you're comfortable, if you could copy the MCC so that we're aware of what your questions are and could share.
You betcha.
Just
Okay,
quickly, Kimberly,
Kevin?
I think other questions will emerge. I sent you over a couple of questions. I think once the ordinance is passed and you address some of the issues that we talked about, Greg mentioned it, you know, Larry as well, compliance and, you know, how we are not only like meeting the standard, but then, you know, there's going to inevitably be other questions that come in. So I think we could probably funnel those questions into the MCC and be a community resource and perhaps get those, you know.
Yeah, I'm happy these meetings coincide after the COSIDE board meeting. So I'll make a whole evening out of it. But when we pass the ordinance, when the board passes the ordinance, maybe that evening or 2 weeks after, or it would be I'd be a month because we don't do it every other week. I could come and present to you guys again to
That would
give
be
an
great.
update.
Yeah.
And I'm open, like, I'm big on community and I'm happy to come if the request is there. I know that Claire asked for 2 weeks ago, but I was already scheduled that evening in another community meeting. So I'm here now. So
Connie, you
I
had a
just have
question?
One question. So, you know, within a lot of the areas up here, there's lots of what we call paper streets that, you know, no one really owns. They're just paper streets. But they're full of vegetation and completely overgrown. How do you see that being mitigated along those kind of things? Because even if they're not, there's lots of streets that aren't even paved that the county does not maintain, that, you know, homeowners.
yeah, I think the conversations we're gonna have in the coming weeks, we're gonna have to identify how we're gonna implement paper streets or Coastside Fire Protection does have a weed abatement program for vacant lots. But they used to have a vegetation management program that was put inactive, but do we need to bring that back? There's a lot of conversation that still needs to have as that ordinance gets finalized and created, so we know what we're working on. Because right now we can say, oh, that's a great idea, but if it doesn't align with the ordinance and the regulations, then we're kind of just spinning our wheels. So
Thank you.
I have one final quick question. Just as you're talking about what you just said, so there's an ongoing conversation that is going to be happening. When would you like to have questions funneled to you, perhaps via an email or, you know, that kind of correspondence, so that those can be looked at and possibly considered as part of the planning?
prior to the 14th of April.
14th of April.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the second full, 14th of April. It's gonna be sometime in that week or the following week, we're gonna have the discussion.
Okay.
are there other questions, Scott?
I just want to throw out one question to anybody who's listening. Does anybody know how to schedule a wood chipping event? Because San Mateo County has a wood chipping program. I just wonder how you get on that.
I think that's an
The
RCD.
RCD,
Okay,
Yeah.
the RCD does that.
And our CD will be at our next meeting.
okay, cool.
Okay, so we had allocated a whole hour for this topic, so.
I do have a question for the board related to this. I sent an
Sure.
email with a presentation I'd like to make to the board in a future meeting, but have never received a reply to that. Will that be discussed at tonight's meeting, or do you guys not know what I'm talking about?
Who's talking?
That's Larry DeYoung, Claire?
It is Larry D.
Larry, you need to reach out to me and try to schedule something for the agenda.
I did, but I sent it to all the members of the Midcoast Community Council.
But if you would please, Kimberly and I make up the agendas, so if you would contact us directly, we can talk to you about it.
Okay, thanks, Claire.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for Jed?
Just don't leave without leaving some cards.
I actually don't have business cards.
Oh, how tricky of you.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we would absolutely love to have you back. I had a couple of questions. One was, you said something about lightening the coastal act, or streamlining, I assume is what you mean, streamlining process wise. How do you, in terms of the coast side, are there particular examples that you could point to that where that would be useful?
When you're within the coastal zone, there's certain restrictions over the way projects can be implemented and certain steps you have to go through. So if those are lightened or modified to speed up projects while still providing safety for the environment, which is how that's going to work, we're still not sure. It would make projects happen quicker than the, CEQA's 16-ish to 24 months potentially. Then you add on needing to do coastal act and other requirements, we could minimize that time frame and be able to get projects shovel ready quicker, which then we'd be able to have work being done quicker, and have more efficient hazard mitigation going on.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of what would be an example of an area that would need that. I mean, is that,
Quarry Park is within the
Quarry
coastal
Park.
zone.
Okay.
That was one of the governor's 35 identified projects.
so we're thinking about like eucalyptus trees or other like large trees or,
I wouldn't necessarily I just think about it as the impact to the environment within the coast. So not just necessarily trees, but brush, grass. There's certain butterflies that require lupin on the.
yeah.
So there's a lot of ecosystem that we need to make sure we're still protecting.
So part of the reason I ask is that the maritime chaparral is sort of a unique habitat, and often people don't view it as that. They don't recognize that even though it's its own habitat, it's not like a forest, but it has the same ecological value, if not more, of that of a forest. So I'm just wondering if areas like that are being looked at. So for instance, the GGNRA land or the state parks land.
They're all going to have a seat at the table for us to make a large scale change. So, yeah.
I guess my concern would be that habitat is in a very small area to begin with. So further damaging it or removing it, is.
Oh, so you're going as if we lighten the rules and then
Right.
got rid of it. I don't see them going, there's no rules, have fun. Like that's not going to happen. It's going to be, we're still going to protect specific environment. We have, I forget what, there's a small little tree in Fall Creek unit in state parks. And it's extremely rare. And we've done a fuel mitigation project in that general area, and that has been protected, and we made sure, like, it's not, I don't think it's going to be like, go for it. It's going to be, this is a specific area that you need to stay out of, or we're going to protect this environment or this species. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question might seem a little off topic, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is, God forbid there is a fire. Some of the ways that fires are addressed now involve dropping chemicals on them. And I've been reading a lot about how the pink stuff, I forget what it's called.
Retardant.
Yeah. How they're discovering that actually is pretty toxic to a lot of wildlife and can impact humans. And it's long lasting. So in San Mateo County, is that used on fires? And is that something that?
Yeah, retardant will be used. I can't give you factual data on that, but if you want to email me, I will see what type of information I can get from our air operations folks. But yeah, we would use retardant to suppress a fire within San Mateo County.
Are there other options, alternatives to using that?
Well, our helicopters majority of the time use water. They could do retardant as well if there's a base set up for them. But we use retardant. That's what helps us be able to effectively mitigate fires quickly. Yeah.
Okay, because I was.
20 years ago, I guess it's more than 30 something years ago, they used to call them like borate bombers. That was a completely different product than we use these days. So my understanding is that the product is much more environmental friendly and
Is
safe.
it called Phosgene?
Phosgene, yes.
Yeah, that's what I've been seeing this studies on. So I would be interested in learning more about that and seeing, you know, if there are particular alternatives that could work just as well so that, you know, you're not just losing everything and adding insult to injury on a burned landscape by just making it more toxic. But thank you for answering the question. So I'll
Yeah,
include
and email me and I can probably I can get you, I'm sure we have a spec sheet on the effectiveness and the impact that the retardant has on the like molecular level.
Okay, that would be great. And also on the marine environment.
We're not gonna, so one thing is that when we have a fire, say a fire was to happen and we have air tankers coming, there's also an air attack. So they're flying and managing the airspace and they have pre-identified areas if there's like certain tributaries or waterways that they will try not to drop retardant in to put it into a specific waterway. And the same goes for our dozers. We have pre-identified areas that we're not going to take out the chaparral environment that's maybe identified in the GGNRA agreement that we have, so that we're taking care of both mitigating the fire, but also providing the environment safety.
Okay, because it just occurs to me that on the coast side, as you were saying that, I mean, water pretty much flows down to the ocean all throughout the mid-coast.
Yeah.
All year.
Yeah.
Most of the year.
Okay. Are there any remaining questions for Jed? I don't see any. So
All right.
thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
This was really great.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for your work.
Excellent presentation. Okay. We are way ahead of time, which is amazing.
We'll make it normal.
The next item on our agenda is the Coastal Resiliency Infrastructure Strategic Plan, or CRISP, follow-up from our last presentation. For further discussion and to consider whether we would send a draft letter. Claire, would you like to speak to this?
I can, unless Gus wants to. Basically, do you want to, the letter is attached to the agenda. It's on the website. It's a brief letter. As you recall, at the last meeting, Gus gave a report on the Department of Emergency Management's ending meeting regarding their activity with CRISP. And where they've left it basically is that they've identified certain projects that remain potential candidates for funding and implementation, but they have not identified what those projects are. And the county executive is currently monitoring those unidentified projects to see what funding might be available so that they can be implemented. There was some concern on the part of the MCC that the projects were actually not identified and that the projects that we had advocated for in the past seemed to have been lost in the shuffle. And we were wanting to make sure that we kept an eye on what projects were important to us. And one of the reasons why the projects were not identified was a concern by Homeland Security that if we identify what our infrastructure problems are, we become vulnerable to hostile actors. We talked with Ray Mueller about this afternoon, and Ray says it's not a big secret what our vulnerabilities are, and that he is happy to identify which projects we originally supported that are still in the mix and keep us in the loop in terms of following what's being done with the projects that we've originally advocated for. So the letter that we have on before us to consider approval for basically asks Ray's office to keep an eye open for the things that we're interested in terms of our local infrastructure, and to let us know how we can support activity toward implementing the things that we're concerned about. The only thing I would change on this letter is to add telecommunications to the list of things that we're concerned about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Connie?
So if you could just help clarify for me, I don't know why there would be such specificity about these particular items. Why would you not want to know about every project that's part of CRISP? I don't know why we're just highlighting certain ones. If it's coastal infrastructure, why would we not want to know about everything that gets allocated?
What else are you thinking we should be including?
Well, I don't know what else. I didn't go through the meeting, so I don't know what else. I'm not saying, I'm just saying you would want everything. Why, is there a reason that you're specifically asking for sea level stormwater?
Because these are things that specifically concern the Midcoast, and because I just didn't want to be totally vague and say, hey, let us know what's going on. We had an original list of things that we were asking them to do, and this is kind of a compilation of what was on our original list.
But you know how like funding, it lists all the projects that get Measure K funded. Like, I would suspect that we would get something like that, right? There would be a project list for everything under this that you would be able to have visibility to.
But there is no project list because it's been like scrubbed. Because of the vulnerability of infrastructure issue. We can simply say, please keep us in the loop if you do anything. But I just wanted to make sure that he had on his radar the kind of things that we're interested in.
Okay, I think Gus has a comment.
But we just changed the word specifically to especially, because these are the points of that. These are not an exhaustive list, but they are the highest priority things. So these are the things that everybody's continually concerned about. So what if we just change it to especially, because that leaves the room for whatever other things you might choose to do that affect us, while still calling out some specifics that's.
So these are the categories that your original requests all fit into?
Yeah, I don't think we had any requests that weren't one of these.
Except for
with the addition of the telecom, yes.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I was not at the last meeting, but kind of piggybacking off of what Connie is saying, adding the especially, but then preemptively to that, if there are additional aspects of this that is more encompassing, to add that as well. So I know, Claire, you're saying that the list was scrubbed, but I imagine that the areas and the projects exist somewhere, and to request that as much of an extensive list as possible, but then in particular, these items, I think would be just a good tack on.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, are there other suggestions for the letter? Other comments, questions? So in terms of next steps, Claire will make those changes to the letter, and then do we?
Public comment?
Oh, sorry, Greg. Greg, I see your hand raised.
So thanks to Claire and whoever went with her to meet with Ray. I'm glad to hear that Ray is willing to surface and disclose the status. Those of you who have been around the council for a while realize that for several years now, we have submitted requests, priorities, and action items. And I don't want to exaggerate, I might be wrong, but I can't remember ever hearing that they've decided to do X or Y or Z. And in particular, there is a list of about 45 items that I submitted and we wrote the county about that were under the CRISP umbrella. In particular, I submitted, I don't know, a dozen. I filled out the long survey form. Those are colored on the spreadsheet on the MCC website in green. And since Ray seems to be quite reasonable and agreeing that disclosing things that have been discussed in public meetings and documented in articles is really not a security vulnerability. I would prefer that this letter attach the previous list of projects and ask, remember if the lady from Department of Emergency Management said they would get back to each of us who submitted something. As far as I know, they have not gotten back to the MCC, and they certainly have not gotten back to me, and I wrote them. So I would like to get an update, and I'd like to ask them to comment on all of them. Now, I realize they will not do that, but we certainly have a bunch of priority items, the ones in green, and telecommunications is on the list in several places. So I would prefer that the letter say, please comment on the projects that are submitted for CRISP and that have been submitted to the county multiple times that are on the attached list. So I guess I'm sort of going where Connie was going. I'm used to a management process that is visible process, visible progress. And I confess I'm tired of not seeing visible process and visible progress from the county. That's my comment.
Thank you, Greg. Kevin?
So I don't want to be kind of counterproductive to what you have just mentioned, but I wonder if it might merit a direct conversation from yourself and from Claire to reach out to Ray and find out perhaps what the reasons were, if there was something that were tying their hands that prevented them from responding to individuals or to the MCC for that matter, prior to making a request that we demand that you respond to each of these items. I just think it would be, I think, more productive for us to understand more clearly from Ray's office or whoever's office it pertains to as to why responses are not given. The MCC is here to service the unincorporated coast side and to bring those issues forward to the Board of Supervisors. So as Greg is intimating, it can be very frustrating to not get a response. But in my communications with the Board of Supervisors over many years, there always seems to be specific reasons as to why they may not have responded to certain requests, hands being tied, something overarching that just prevents them from doing so. And in that case, it would be nice to at least have an open door between the chair of this council who, works with the Board of Supervisors or in conjunction with, to hear that from Ray specifically.
And I think Claire and I did hear that to some degree today when we met with Ray. And Claire, please correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think a lot of the impediment is just where funding will come from. And I think that was part of Gus's presentation last time, that funding is the limiting factor. And so things are prioritized now according to the funding that they are realistically going to able to bring in to cover a particular project.
And I understand that, but now we are here and we're advocating for individuals just like Greg, who are likely to become disheartened or, disillusioned with this process that we are supposed to advocate for our community when we don't get responses back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as much of a hard line as we can create to say to the Board of Supervisors that is responsible, if it's just a funding issue, tell us that it's just a funding issue so that we can report back and community members like Greg or whomever gets some kind of response.
Sure. I mean, I think that was the response we got from Ray today, and that he will be following up with us. Certainly, Claire and I will bring it up again at our next meeting and just keep on top of it. I do know that he mentioned that the top priority right now is going to be the SAM plant. Mm-hmm. But the sewer authority Midcoast. But certainly we can follow up on that. Claire, did you have further comment on this?
No, I think that I think what you're saying is accurate.
Okay. Gus, did you want to add anything from what you understand?
No, I think it really is funding, and it seems unlikely to me that our projects would have been easier to fund than a lot of the other projects that they would have gotten from other jurisdictions within the county.
I just wanted to reiterate what Kevin said. I think everybody deserves the courtesy of everybody deserves the courtesy of a response, whatever it is.
Agreed.
So you want a formal,
Yeah.
you want a formal written response
Well,
or?
something, yeah. I mean, I reached out to Claire about the Samtrans. Did we get a response? You know, it's just like, is it Larry saying, you know, I sent a note to the MCC and I haven't got a response. I think it's just, acknowledgement that you got it and we'll look at it, or we're not able to take it up at this point in time, but
Right.
just the courtesy of the
I
response.
mean, Greg brings up this exhaustive list and that nothing has gotten responded to. So to kind
That's
of
not,
go back to that and say, can you please tell us why? I think a lot of members of the community wonder why the MCC is unable to respond to things, when in reality, it's not that the MCC is not able to respond to them, it's that we're not being responded to. And I think there then becomes a breakdown within the larger community, like what is the resource in the MCC if we're not getting responses to these things that we're bringing to them on a regular basis?
That's a fair point. So we will ask Ray to send us a formal response the next time we meet.
Even if it's vague, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
If it's funding, then it's funding, and I think Gus knows as well as any of us, that's generally, what it's gonna be.
Okay, Scott?
Say, I'm speaking in general now about a person that asks the MCC a question. Say, for instance, someone from the community sends us a message saying, hey, I think there are wolves in our neighborhood. You guys need to do something about it. But I understand the Board of Supervisors, and when they get a question like that, immediately in your mind, you think, what would you like me to do about that? And so you get stuck with no answer, because you can't just say, no, we will not do anything about that. It doesn't seem like an appropriate way to address it, but that's the answer. So maybe they're not answering us because the list is too hard to answer. If we sent them little bits of things, they might be answering us easier than sending them like 50 requests for things. So this is pretty good because it asks for a few things, and maybe they'll be able to respond to that, to the letter we have up there, because it's easier than, like I said, a spreadsheet of things that they have to research. So
Okay.
I mean, I like this, but I would keep in mind that sometimes we ask things that they're hard to answer, we're unwilling to answer them, or we just don't know the answer. But again, it's hard to say no, right? So
can I just
Can
piggyback?
I add, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and it's important to know how they typically communicate. So maybe we just need to get looped into it in a way that we haven't been looped into.
yeah.
Because there's already a protocol or process in place and we're just not looped in.
So.
That's what I was trying to say in this letter. It's because giving somebody a list of 50 demands is not, and then saying, oh, you didn't answer me, is really different from saying, what's the process, then what can we expect? And how can we participate? It depends on what we're asking for. If we're asking for them to do everything we want them to do now, we're not going to get the same answer as if we're asking them to explain what's going on and how what we can anticipate happening.
I agree with you, Claire. I just think, I think that it would be like a sidebar situation where you and Kimberly having that extensive list in addition to this letter, which is segmented and smaller pieces and easier to maybe dissect. But going back to that and say, in addition, do you have any kind of formal responses to these so that we can do our diligence within the community and represent them as best as possible?
Point taken. And I think we did that to some extent today. By the way, Supervisor Mueller and Marisol would have been here tonight, but there was an event. So they weren't able to make it and they apologized. Otherwise, they would probably be able to answer us directly in the meeting.
And I by no means am intimating that I think it should be contentious or angry. That's not at all where I'm coming from. I think that Ray's office has been really responsive and very kind of forthcoming about shortcomings and why certain things can't happen. I think what Connie alluded to is maybe we're just out of the loop and how they communicate about those things, and you know, if there's a pack of wolves, and they're not going to do anything because, well, they just don't know how to respond to that. I mean, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and part of it also is that things take time to, with all the other things coming at them, things take time to respond to.
Sure.
These are all good points. Are there other questions, comments, suggestions about the letter?
I can't see everybody's hands.
They would pop up, I
No,
think.
there's no other.
I
If, we would make 2 amendments to it, if we're gonna vote on it.
Oh, well, that was my next question. Do we want to vote on the letter with the suggestions
Are you
mentioned?
entertaining a motion?
Sure.
I move that we accept and send the letter with two changes, changing the word especially in the second paragraph, or changing the word specifically in the second paragraph to especially and adding telecommunications.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And I also make the motion that we incorporate that broader piece in there, and that we are, asking for them to revisit past items that have been brought up at their convenience at some point, but especially these items.
So are you offering
So
that as a
you're-
friendly amendment to the motion?
That's correct.
Is there a
Do you
second to
accept
the,
that?
Sure.
He's the one who has to accept because it was his motion.
okay,
A friendly amendment. What did you say? Is that right?
Yes, it's friendly.
so in that case, Connie, can you call the roll?
Sure. Claire,
Yes,
Kimberly,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Gus,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Connie, yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Let me take this down from the screen. Next on our agenda is council activity. Who would like to go first? Are there any things to report? Scott?
I again attended the Half Moon Bay City Council meeting, gave our update to them, and it was great, so.
And just quickly with the GCSD, it looks like the preliminary survey data has come back, and while I attended their last meeting as an individual and not as an MCC member, I think the value was something like 70% in favor. There were some concerns about the educational component, and I know that the board did agree to entertain further ideas. They have already extended the lease to the current tenant. So that was part of the request that came in from the survey, community members wanting to see that happen. And then I think the NAIC deck was finally voted on and submitted.
Okay. So the survey is still live?
No, I don't think so. And I think what they're doing is they're having to go back and do some cleanup where there were maybe duplicity and some responses, or there were a number of concerns around some community members still feeling like they weren't able to access that. And I don't know if they're entertaining anything in addition to that, a continuation, like you mentioned, that was not specifically stated as an option at this point. I think they've kind of exhausted their efforts, but I know they want to be as inclusive as possible.
So just a clarifying question, the survey did not go out to anybody beyond El Granada?
It went out to everybody within the GCSD district, and then they put up boxes and drop boxes and posters from one side to the next side of the unincorporated coast side, including Half Moon Bay, all the way.
Because I was actually waiting for that survey and I never saw it, so I didn't get a chance to respond to it, and I don't think others did either. I guess I'm wondering, how wide should this survey be? And
There were drop boxes at Springlers, at the post office. I mean, I saw the survey in multiple areas, but I also got the email directly because I get their newsletter.
Claire would like.
actually, but Kimberly, it only was, the only people they wanted the opinions from were people in their service district, as Kevin says, which includes Frenchman's Creek. I actually did get a copy of the survey and I filled it out, but then when I submitted it, they said, too bad, we don't want it.
I see. Okay, so it wasn't.
Good try, Claire. Good try.
You tried. And
Um,
that did actually come up because I think this council has recommended to them to do broader outreach into the neighboring areas. But because the funding is through the GCSD and their service district, I think they used the primary mail list came from, I believe, Recology, and they did focus specifically on their service district. But they did get a good response, similar to the earlier survey, but even a higher favorability response.
Okay, I just recall at our meeting when this was brought up that there were people who expressed concern that it impacts all unincorporated coastside residents and that we should all have some input into it. So that's a little disappointing, although I'm glad there was more response this time.
I think they did their best to listen and take public comment as it was as it's been being discussed now for many years, actually. Barbara Dye happens to be here. I don't know if she wants to make a comment about that, but I do know that they wanted to hear from as many people as possible and tried to be as considerate as possible of the entire unincorporated coastside.
Okay. Are there other council activity to report? I have some. Claire, did you have anything you wanted to report?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Let's see. And it just flew right out of my head. What I was gonna report.
I didn't see anything fly out.
Harbor,
Well, maybe I won't report
Montero,
anything.
Harbor, Montero.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, the Harbor District.
Okay, good.
So, at the last Harbor District meeting, Catherine Slater Carter, following our last meeting, did agendize the topic of changing the time of their meetings. So that potentially, well, as I understand it, will be on the agenda for the next Harbor District meeting if folks are interested and probably should attend to weigh in on it.
Can I ask a quick question or make a comment? Sorry, I'm looking back at the minutes and being filled in as much as I was. Isn't there an opportunity for the MCC to help the Harbor District and the other entities involved that, seem to have stated that they're not getting responses, interagency wise? Ray Mueller has offered his coastside community space as a meeting space for meetings like that. And wouldn't it be prudent for us to get all parties involved with some of the topics that came up in one place and be a facilitator of some kind of meeting? I know that the space has been made available to us. I know that when it comes to individuals being frustrated by lack of response or agencies not being able to talk with one another or to get an answer to these types of things, that this keeps coming up. I think we have the space. I think that it sounds like something that aligns with our charter to foster. And I think that would be even if it's just a suggestion to those organizations, that we could help facilitate that.
Right. So, and others can correct me if I've got this wrong, but at our last meeting, this did come up, this idea of facilitating or coordinating conversations across overlapping jurisdictions that could coordinate better on projects. And I think we explored that a little today in our conversation with Ray. I think it bears a little more thinking about how that would actually play out, because as the MCC, you can encourage it amongst all the stakeholders, but you can't make them come to the table, and you certainly can't make them, participate. Or Chris, did you have a?
Yeah, I mean, we wrote a letter concerning the road to the top of Montero Mountain, where we said, we'd love to help everybody come sit down at the table, and,
They poo-pooed it?
We've heard nothing from anybody.
That's a shame. I think that, sometimes it takes, especially in community politics, it takes repeating the steps over and over and over again until you get to a yes.
Yeah.
I just think as kind of a standing charge and with the ability to kind of foster that within our broader community, I think continuing to offer it and highlighting the benefits. It's not a, you have to come to this kind of thing, but you know, it would benefit the larger community as a whole. We have this space. Can we not foster some internal communication and try to get something to happen?
It's not a bad idea. And certainly, you know, I think we're willing to look at it and look into it. But I'm not quite sure what the action is at
So
this point.
I'm thinking how this would unfold for the parking on Highway 1, right?
Yeah.
So you need Caltrans and you need these Granada and you need Harbor. And what would we,
And the citizenry.
and everybody around it, how, I mean, it sounds good to do it. But what do we expect from them? Are we going to expect them to change their plans? Do we expect them to work together? Are we going to have an agenda for them to look at? Here are the points we'd like you to discuss. So it sounds like me, it's a pretty heavy lift that would require planning. If we want to be successful at something like this.
I agree.
So.
But you guys have suggested it, correct? Like
It has been suggested, yeah.
So I think like just a quick piggyback is what if some questions are preemptively sent as maybe a soft construct of an agenda. Because I think when you start to get into community and all of the parties and public comment and all of that, it can be overwhelming. And then all of a sudden the agencies are wondering, are we just gonna get into like a debate instead of having some actionable items?
Yeah, do we expect change? I mean, do we expect them to be able to say, all right, forget about the parking, forget about the bike lane on 1. They're not gonna make that decision at that point, right?
Yeah.
So again, I don't know what our expectations are for that. I would love it to happen, but I don't know what our expectations of an outcome would be.
Claire, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, a couple of things. We've talked about different formats of doing this, about whether we should just have a general statement saying we want everybody to get together and talk, just like we did about Montara Mountain, and maybe with the same results. But we have had things that could be used as templates that we've done in the past. One of them is the Parks Forum that we had annually in the distant past, where all the different parks agencies came together for one big meeting where they all talked about what they were doing and how they interacted with each other. And you know, we could do, and that was pretty positive because everybody loves parks. We could do something like that, just invite everybody to come talk about their interests in this geographic area. On the other hand, there's such contentiousness, and so many of the players in this particular problem area don't seem to know what their roles are or what the roles of the other people are. I talked with some of the people from Half Moon Bay who had, I guess Gus did too, about their part in this whole stretch of road there by Surfers Beach. And their reaction was very strange, I thought, and very parochial. We talked today with Ray about the county's role in this stretch of land. And he said, I had no idea we were involved. This is so much more complicated than I thought. And he said, we've got to do something, but I'm not sure where to start. And I think that people are just now, all the different players are starting to see what's going on and starting to see where they fit into this picture. And I think if we push it too fast, too hard, we're going to lose something. So I'm not really sure what we should do, but I think that the Ray seemed interested in actually taking some leadership and trying to get people to talk to each other, but he was still trying to figure out where he stood. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I think I would like to do something, but I think it's really complicated.
You want to agendize it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
For further discussion.
Yeah,
Connie?
Well, thank you for bringing it up to Ray, first of all, because I think it does have to come from a high level for something this complicated for sure. And there are ways to facilitate conversations across groups, but it does have to be more of a working session type thing to do that. And I don't know if they've done that in the past, but it would be really helpful. I mean, if you just take the one element of parking, where Catherine talked about how she asked, for Caltrans to put 300 spots in, and, how's the Harbor District? I mean, and then people did offer suggestions. I think if they did it at some type of a working session with the right agencies involved, that maybe you would find some solutions. And so I think it's great that you talked to Ray about it, because I think it would be helpful if they start, because you're right, it's Half Moon Bay as well. I've forgotten about them, but they are impacted in it as well.
I brought that up last Tuesday.
You did, and it was an interesting response that you received.
And what did they say?
Were you
I was.
They said, we'll look into it.
Oh,
right? Something
that
like
was it?
that.
Something like
That
that.
was all.
They said we have to watch out for Sams. We have to protect them.
Well, I didn't know if I should say that on air, Claire.
Well, if they said it, but I think both Connie and Claire, you make very good points, and I think if we could just defer to your knowledge, having listened to kind of all of this grievance over this period of time, but then to hybridize it, as Connie is pointing to maybe pull out a few chunks. It's not that it has to be an MCC meeting and that it has to comply with the guidelines of what our meeting would look like. But if we were able to coordinate with Ray and ask him to be involved, and it sounds like at least preliminarily he is interested in doing that, and be a facilitator for that.
Yeah.
That would, I think, be a big gift to the community, especially when.
So I'm a little concerned that we've gone in to an actual conversation about this, and this was supposed to just be council activity.
Okay.
So I think Scott's suggestion that we agendize it for
Yes.
more discussion would be helpful.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
so we
Okay.
can nail down the players, specifically who would be talked to,
What items?
sites, items, and then send a letter to them and say, we'd like to have. do
A
this."
nice letter.
Yeah.
A friendly list.
Well, and an opening discussion might just be as simple as, let's all talk about ideas for how we work better together. It could just be
Yeah,
as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Other council activity? Okay.
I did try to go through some of the middle mile, but there's quite a bit of material in there, so, but maybe we can follow up on that at another point in time too.
Sure.
Plan said there was funding there, so don't want to let that go too far.
So I'm going to transition here to future agendas. I think we have a good agenda set up for next time, which would be the stormwater report. And are there other agendas, in addition to the things that are on this list that are on the agenda for tonight?
So do we have to make a specific request to agendize what we were just discussing for this?
Yes,
agenda?
so I have that written down and it'll be added to the list. One thing we added since last time was AB 259 Rubio, which is a bill to extend AB 2449 and its attendant bill that I don't know what the word is, that facilitated it to move forward. AB 2449 expires at the end of the year. And so we thought we should put this on the agenda and think about submitting a letter in support of making it permanent. AB 2449 allows people to participate remotely in certain circumstances.
It expires, is that what?
It expires at the end of this year.
Yeah.
Other things to put
Well,
on?
Larry DeYoung's request.
I see that.
GCSD did say that they would like to try to formalize some kind of presentation or request around the survey and next steps. So I can, at their next meeting that I attend, ask them like what they would like and see if they would like something to be agendized.
Sure, if they'd like to come back and do a presentation, maybe of certain new survey results. probably that would be for May or June.
Sure, I don't think that they're probably ready to move on it that fast, but
Okay.
considering when the next meeting is and when I would be there.
And then Larry DeYoung's request was to have this group come and give a particular present. Um. I don't know what
I
that
don't
was.
remember their name, but they're the one that's.
Red Alert
the,
Montera Moss Beach.
the fire.
fire.
Kit that
Okay.
of Montana.
Gus is on that. I mean, I'm sorry, Greg
Greg
is
is
on
on
that.
that, yes.
Do we
Is there
feel,
something you want about the group?
well, I'm wondering, that would be a little different than what we normally, the kinds of presentations we normally ask for, right? So this is a community group. I suppose it would be similar to the El Granada Advocates.
What is the topic
Are
for the presentation?
the topic would be a presentation about their request for attention from Caltrans to address the fire hazard in the Caltrans right of way.
And I think we'll have some progress to report as well. It's a hazard for the entire community, by the way, all the way to Half Moon Bay.
Right. I guess what I'm wondering is, do we need like some authority to also give a presentation to balance?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Am I off base?
I mean, I would like to suggest that, like anybody who presents to us, that they go through the channels and submit a topic or an area that they will focus on and what they'll be presenting on, so that, as you say, if there needs to be some balance or a counter to that it can be looked at.
I think Larry's done part of that by sending his request to Claire.
Okay. Did you have a?
Well, if we're gonna require somebody else to present, who would we?
I guess that's what I'm asking, is it,
Counterpoint with Caltrans.
Or maybe we have him come back when we have Jed, whatever his name was here tonight, come back at the same time or something like that. We can balance it.
okay. Okay. Other items for future agendas, or is that it?
Enough for now.
That sounds good.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot.
So enough for
It
now.
does, and that concludes our agenda for this evening,
motion to adjourn.
amazingly enough.
Let's get out of here.
Okay.
Are we doing formal motions to adjourn? 'Cause I know